This is Kevin Gaw on Tuesday, September 15th at 8:53 a.m. with Dr. Beatrice Golomb also on the line. And it is my pleasure to interview Joe Sturdivant for the Gulf War Legacy Project. Joe, welcome here today and thank you for taking your time to participate in this interview.
Thank you, Kevin.
So, uh, can you tell me a little bit about what your position was, what branch you were in, and what your function was when you were in the military?
So I went in the Marine Corps in 1984. I went in as enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and the military picked my occupational specialty, which was a heavy motor vehicle operator. So I was assigned as a heavy motor vehicle operator with 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, and I was deployed in the early '90s for the Gulf War. It was actually called Desert Shield. I volunteered to be a participant in that event. And then the president declared war and it became Desert Storm. So I was a heavy motor vehicle operator in that capacity. I was a young E5, which is a sergeant.
And what territories did you go to during the operation?
So I was attached to the Marine Wing Support Squadron 374. We were actually augmented out of Yuma, Arizona, and we were deployed to a place called Al Jabal in Saudi Arabia. We actually traveled various areas in that Gulf area, but our main base, the forward operating base, was Al Jaber Airport, and but we traveled all throughout the uh, the Gulf region because I was a convoy commander. Actually, I was on convoys. We actually our responsibility as a motor transport unit was to transport the uh, line units and also the air wing units to help build flight lines throughout the Gulf region. Build we used to call AM2 mat, which is it's a specialized flight deck that we created air support for the air aviation combat element, which was that's what the Marine Wing Support Squadrons do. We provide aviation support and ground support through motor transport assets, to personnel transport. So I remember being in Raja Mashar, some other place I can't even pronounce, but it was a very large region where we did convoys to Kuwait to support infantry units as well.
And what was the end date of your deployment?
I remember getting back March or April of March, April, May of 1991 when I returned from home from the Gulf.
And regarding some of your exposures or experiences, what do you remember about some of these exposures from your deployment, including any drugs you were taking, or drugs you were given, chemicals you were around, or any environmental toxins you might have been exposed to?
So, being deployed, we took. I remember taking a series of anthrax shots. It was mandatory shots. And then once we got in, this was before. Actually, I remember also our camouflage utility was sprayed with some DEET. It was supposed to be repel insects and mosquitoes and things like that. I remember all our uniforms were sprayed. And some of our equipment, our camouflage nettings were sprayed. Um, I remember once we got over there, also we were called in the formation where we had the branch medical clinic or the field corpsman would give us some type of pills, but they would not disclose to us what these pills were because it was, I guess, so to speak, classified. They didn't even tell us they're going to document it. So I remember taking a series of pills, which I don't know what they were, but maybe 3 or 4 incidents where we had to take pills. I remember that. As far as exposure to being in the environment, there was a lot of oil fires we were exposed to, a lot of sandstorms. I remember vividly being covered in, in oil from the oil fires. I remember being exposed to a lot of. We actually had to burn our own feces and other items and stuff like that too. Being a young E5, I was in charge of the burn pit. Um, detailed at times. And so, but throughout my experience, we were exposed to a lot of things. Like I said, Scud missile attacks. We were exposed to some things. I remember one time being on a convoy, and I was seeing a lot of dead camels on the side of the road. It was like something you see in a movie, like a bunch of dead. It was unreal to see as many dead animals that I saw as far as camels on the side of the roads. So um, I was exposed to human remains, seeing like bodies. We didn't do any recovery, but we would see those on the side of the road or in some of the vehicles that we had destroyed. I'll say we, meaning our coalition forces, had destroyed our particular unit.
And regarding some of the exposures or experiences that you've had, what do you remember about the exposures from your deployment, including any drugs you were given, chemicals you were around, or any environmental toxins you're exposed to?
So while being assigned to as a member of the Marine Support Squadron 374 as a heavy motor vehicle operator, before we actually left to go to a theater in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and also Kuwait, I remember a lot of preparation occurred with our supply. I remember we had to turn in some camouflage utilities, which was sprayed to with DEET to protect us from any insects that like mosquitoes and things like that in that region. I remember they took our camouflage utilities. So potentially having worn those cameras that may have offered some exposure uh, to me. Also, when I arrived in theater, being a heavy motor vehicle operator, we were on various convoys. When I say we, meaning my unit, um, we're exposed to oil fires, a lot of environmental hazards from the oil fire, the residue, oil residue, just the chemicals from the dust. I remember a lot of sandstorms we experienced. We also were told we took a series of anthrax shots too. I think it was a 5 series shot that we took. I remember it was mandatory. You could not refuse to take the shots. Also, you'd be a court martial. So I remember taking the anthrax shots. And also when we arrived in theater, we were called to formation on various occasions. I remember 3 different occasions where I was given some pills, some pills in which I tried to ask what kind of pills were they. They would not disclose, so they said it was classified pills that we had to take. And so I remember taking those on 3 different occasions while in theater. Um, Also was exposed to seeing dead animals on the side of the road. It was very bizarre for me to see a dead camel. I maybe seen 1 or 3 different dead animals throughout my convoys on the side of the road. I don't know what caused them to die, but they didn't like they were blown up or anything, just like they was just dead. I remember seeing human remains on the side of the road sometimes in our convoys where um, I guess from the air explosions and things like that, but we did not evacuate the body. We just went past the human remains that was in the vehicles that were left charred on the side of the road. Um, I remember we had a couple Scud missile blasts near our area. I don't know if it was chemical attacks, but we were always afraid that we would always mop up to mop level 4 with full protective equipment, gas masks, booties, gloves, and everything on at that time. So um, that's what I remember about my exposure as far as any environmental hazards, particularly the air quality was terrible. Not being able to see camis being soiled with oil and stains that you couldn't even remove. I remember they issued many pairs of camouflage utility because of the residue that was stuck in our camis. Oh, protective gear was scarce. So we were using protective gear all the time, yes. We constantly used that. We didn't, I mean, it was limited access of equipment during that time. So.
So, were there any other pesticides besides the DEET that you mentioned used in the area, such as the mess units or the mess halls?
Not to my knowledge. I know one time when we had a serious, I guess a lot of people call it dysentery. It became, I guess, some of the water that came off the pilots. I remember we were told not to drink any more of the bottled water for some time. There was a shortage of bottled water at one time in our fall. But as far as any other chemicals near the mess hall, I wasn't aware of that at all. One thing about my position as a heavy motor vehicle operator, we worked hand in hand with supply and the mess hall. We would support them as far as picking up stuff from the ports, bringing it back to the fob. You know, I was the convoys picking up equipment, picking up mail. We used to pick up things and deliver to the mess hall, and also we used to pick up things with supply. So I had a very good connection as far as um, liaison daily or weekly with supply, mess hall, and other agencies within our unit because again, transportation and moving personnel, moving equipment, stuff like that. So,
Any exposure? Were you near the Camisea munitions depot demolition?
being motor transport, I remember we actually would pick up certain munitions that we would find throughout the different caches that the EOD units would find. We would transport them back to our supply for analysis. I don't know what they were, but I remember we did pick up some unexplained munitions. I don't know what they were. So it had some Soviet attack marks on them. I remember seeing some of the things like that. They wouldn't even let us take pictures of certain things. We were actually prohibited or threatened to be court-martialed if we get caught with cameras.
Were there ever any friendly fire episodes where depleted uranium might have been utilized?
I can't recall any incidents, whether it be on the net, meaning the net, meaning the communication channels that the military use, or hear any kind of scuttlebutt from any service members talking about any incidents of uranium or depleted uranium at all. No.
And you mentioned some oil fires and burn pits. Do you recall any effects initially or even after being in close proximity to those fires?
Um, Effects. I mean, to me, I mean, business is business. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, like you expose a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, you just go with the flow. Kind of like we sort of kind of normalized what the environmental factors were, not really taking into consideration that the risk factors, after the fact or during the time of war, during the time of conflict. We didn't really give it any mind because we're young and invincible at that time. I know I was young and invincible, so I didn't really give it any thought as to what some of the outcomes could be as far as my respiratory or any kind of ailments that may occur at that time because I was about 25, 26 years old. So don't recall the time, And I know at times I had scratchy throat. I had irritations in my eyes at times. I think that just go along with being exposed to the oil fires and just the dust storms and things like that. Was that's what I think. I don't know if that answers your question.
And regarding the vaccinations that you were given, do you recall if that was before deployment, after deployment, or both?
Yeah, the vaccinations occurred before the anthrax shot, and then once we got in theater, it was a 5-part series, I believe it was. So I remember taking some anthrax shots over there while in theater in Saudi Arabia. But also I remember taking the pills too on 3 different occasions of formation. And we were asking like, what are these pills for? It was classified. We can't tell you. But we were forced. They may actually. What was interesting to me was they made sure that we took them. It was bizarre that they actually stood there and watched us put them in our mouths. So I never knew anything that would happen like that before. Like why are they watching us put those in our mouths? I thought that was kind of odd looking back in retrospect. Like why would they watch us insert this medication in our mouth? They didn't take it upon ourselves to say, okay, we're gonna give you this pill, you got to take it. They actually watched us take it. They actually, I mean, it was to me looking back in retrospect, that was bizarre that they would actually watch us take the medication.
And when did you first realize that some veterans might be having some health problems?
Well, actually, I had some unexplained illnesses as I was getting older, like in the 80s and in the early 90s. I started having like certain rashes that were coming out of nowhere. Now I was on active duty at the time. I would go to sick call, like, what is this? They didn't know. Um, and I started having fatigue issues, really drowsy, sleepy, just having sleep issues, like trying to stay awake. Um, I'm like, I know I had 8 hours of sleep. Why am I feeling drowsy? I would have this sense of what's the word? Yeah, just being drowsy all the time or feeling fatigue a lot of fatigue.
And were you in an area that where chemical alarms went off?
Oh, most definitely. We were Al Jabal, right there near the airport. A little base outside the near the airport in the dirt. So it was always alarms. I remember 3 or 4 times hearing the Scud missile alerts. We had to bunker down. So yes.
And were there ever any indicators that you might have been exposed to nerve gas?
Not to any disclosure that they may have allowed us to find out about. I don't recall anything. I don't recall any incidents where people had any symptoms of any kind of nerve agents. At least it was not publicized or noticed or noted through scuttlebutt or through just general talk in the fog. So I don't recall in our area, direct area. And that's your question.
And what kinds of symptoms were originally reported following deployment?
You talking about symptoms for me? Oh,
Yes, yes.
so I had respiratory. I had like some. I would always have like my nose would drip a lot. I would have like sinusitis or some kind of sinus congestions, or I would have a lot of sinus issues. My eyes would run. I would have tear ducts just dripping sometimes. Um, I would also have a lot of fatigue, just trying to stay awake at times throughout the day. Just feeling like ran down a lot. So I'd always, I didn't really know. So I just thought maybe just because working in long hours in the Marine Corps, we work long hours, but it wasn't normal to have sinus as much as I had them. I thought it was allergies, but it was just very bothersome to me. Actually, I got service connected from my rhinitis or sinusitis because of the condition. I actually have um, that still going on today, and along with the fatigue, still exists. I can have 8 hours of sleep still feel fatigue. I actually um, have a CPAP machine also as well. So it may have been the onset of my condition occurring from that. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
And you sort of touched on this a little, but were there any more symptoms that have evolved through the years?
Yeah, I didn't recognize that I had this thing called post-traumatic stress, and it could have been the onset of the beginning of it again. I, so yeah, just chronic fatigue all the time, feeling achy pains. Actually, they did muscle biopsy because they thought my CK levels were pretty high, and they couldn't explain why the CK levels were high. I don't even work out, but my CK levels have always been high. I think that could be a factor for my service in the Gulf War. That my CK levels are always high. I don't even work out. I don't do any extreme workouts. The only thing I do is basically run. But actually, it brought alarm to my medical doctor, my primary care doctor. They actually sent me to a specialized clinic to evaluate to see why my CK levels are so high for being a non-workout person. So I think it could have been attributed to my exposure to the Gulf. That's what I believe.
And what has this impact had? What has the impact of this illness had on your life?
What's the impact of what?
What has been the impact of this illness on your life?
So I think any condition or any exposure to anything other than the ordinary can also impact anybody's life. But mine directly, I mean, I always have to get feedback from my family. Like, why are you always coughing, or why are you always blowing your nose, or you always have discharge, and just they know I have a nose problem. I have a big nose already, but they know there's something different about me. Always trying to blow my nose, or waking up in the morning like you know clearing my nose, the sinus that I have. Constantly feeling like I'm always trying to sleep. Like you sleep a lot, or you always drowsing off. You just woke up. Why are you drowsing off? So it's problematic because I don't feel like I have the quality of life that I should have, especially when it comes to studying. I can start reading a book and just fall asleep immediately without after 1 or 2 pages. So it's been problematic the fact that I shouldn't have to feel like I'm drowsy all the time or trying to stay awake. I don't even drink coffee, and so it's just weird that potentially that my exposure could be attributed to why I have these conditions as far as being drowsy, being low energy, may have particularly have high CK levels and other conditions like sinus issues. Um, I know I have tinnitus because of my exposure, being in those trucks and convoys for long periods of time. So, um, to answer your question.
And what kinds of attitudes have you encountered about your illness?
Um, Attitudes, I mean, I guess it's not a positive attitude, especially when you get feedback from my own family members. Those are ones that live closely with me. So that's the only feedback I really get. The feedback I've gotten before has caused academic challenges for me in school where I've been dropped because not being able to pay attention or have seem to be contribute to me my ability to retain and learn like other people because it's a challenge, trying to stay awake, trying to stay attuned, especially during lecture time when you're trying to fight your sleep, stay awake. So it's been a challenge throughout my life, but I learned to compensate. I learned to find strategies on how to overcome those challenges.
And what about some attitudes that you might have encountered from VA doctors or any civilian doctors?
Uh, you said attitudes. I mean, to me, I'm not one that likes to sort of kind of look at what people really think about me as far as in the context of my personality, who I am, because I'm gonna be the best person as my mother raised me, have some good values, respect people, be kind to people, be nice, and I don't really take things really seriously. I'm not really sensitive. I enjoy feedback. I think my background has allowed me to accept feedback, not as criticism, but as a monumental moment to help me improve myself or help me see some things that I'm not aware of. It's like the Johari's window. Sometimes you can't see unless somebody give you feedback. So taking that feedback from other people that have attitudes. Now, everybody has a different way of presentation, but frankly speaking, I think most of the times I don't receive negative feedback from my doctors, but they are concerned about me. That's why they refer me to various clinics, specialty clinics, to be assessed to find out what's going on. And I graciously accept that feedback, because again, it's going to probably make me have a better quality of life.
And what would you say is your worst or most negative experience with physician attitudes surrounding your illness?
Um, I think a lot of physicians, and I know I'm generalizing this from my perspective in the VA context, they're not aware that this Gulf War illness or any elements of the research that's not being published, or they're not aware that hey, there are service members that have went forward to the Persian Gulf area that were exposed to certain chemicals and conditions that are science that our U.S. government has not allowed scientists or has not provided grant money for those researchers to find out what's going on. It's just like the Agent Orange situation where Vietnam veterans were complaining about hey Agent Orange, and for many years the government denied there was no Agent Orange, but it took those individual professionals that said, you know what, something's odd about these individuals coming back. They had the same cluster of symptoms, they had the same cluster of conditions that have affected them. Matter of fact, they're dying off. So what is going on? There's a variable of something that has happened to them. Let's find out what it is. And so it took those individuals that had a conscience to say, you know what, time out, U.S. government. They need to get this shit right because people have died off. It's unfortunate. It's been 40 plus years, but let's do something about it. Let's compensate these individuals. Let's acknowledge this stuff. So I think that's the same situation with the Gulf War. A lot of uh, research is limited because again, uh, who needs to fund? It costs money to fund research, so there's not that much research out there. So because of that, I get just like marijuana, THC, it hasn't been approved by the FDA. It hasn't been approved by DEA because again, it's a Schedule One drug. How much research? Research is being um, limited because of the government stance. So that's how I look at it. I don't know if it, I don't mean to go off on that tangent, but I just want to share.
Did you have any best or most standout experiences with physician attitudes?
Oh hell yeah! I've had an opportunity to participate in a couple Gulf War research um, as a participants as participants in the Gulf War research, which to me that lets me know that somebody's out there is trying to call out what's not being exposed or what may have happened to our service members. So I've had some positive experience that there are some researchers out there that's trying to get this acknowledged worldwide that hey, those service members, men and women that were in theater during this time frame may have been exposed to X, Y, Z. Let's publicize this. Let's do right by bringing the science, by bringing the the data forward in the numbers and showing them, hey, this is what's going on. So that's my positive experience being a part of any research element or group or PI or doctor that wants to do that to show that this thing really exists. So that's a great experience for me to be a part of that.
Have the early attitudes that you've experienced evolved through the years?
Has my early attitude? Yes, it has. Because I see more and more stuff in the context of the VA, for example. They have this thing called environmental exposure now. Where they're now looking at the potential risk or potential exposure of service members that have served in that Gulf War region. And I think that wouldn't have came to light if it wasn't those researchers holding the government accountable to our veterans. Like, for example, the I'm also a registered member of the contaminated Camp Lejeune water. For the longest time, there's nothing wrong. It took the Aaron Brockovich situation to expose that hey, these toxins in the water does damage. So no, we had the same situation happen for the active duty service members in Camp Lejeune. So if it wasn't for someone that stood forward and said, hey, I'm going to expose our these industries, these companies, these corporate giants that are controlling our governments. If it wasn't for those individuals, so my attitude is definitely yes. Hey, if it wasn't for the research being acknowledged now by the VA, now they're starting to acknowledge. That showed a very positive attitude that hey, there are those that really care about our service member and men and women who have served, that have given that the ultimate sacrifice, which is to serve their country, and those, especially for those that have lost their lives due to exposure, that have uh, created, that had diseases that's unexplained, that had cancerous conditions that are unexplained, and they can be categorized by some of the research. But again, nobody wants to acknowledge that, so to speak. So my attitude is definitely a more of a positive one. That now that they have this environmental exposure through the VA healthcare systems and through the various war-related illness research, I guess there's a war-related center, and which is a specialty entity in the VA system where they look at the unexplained conditions that service members have. They do a more thorough assessment to find out what their exposures are and what they've been exposed to. So if it wasn't for those attitudes of those doctors or researchers, we wouldn't have the war-related illness studies programs in the VA system. I know I just went off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You already touched on like your most negative or most positive experiences, but are there any more high or low points, positive or negative situations that you've had that you'd like to touch upon?
Um, Not that I can think of any time. I just, like I said, I'm just emphatically motivated by the fact that now the VA has created a program. They actually have a particular designated personnel that's a specialized provider that does assessments for Gulf War illness, that does assessments for what they call environmental hazards. And so they have actually a primary care doctor that have been assigned throughout the United States. These are throughout the various VAs where they have. Then they also have a provider that does the assessments. This person works in the health and benefits, and he does environmental um, exposure. He has the questionnaire. He has the various template questions that I guess that Congress or that the VA Medical Center has acknowledged as the appropriate questions to ask for individuals that may have been exposed to various elements of exposure in combat or theaters and so forth. So that's a good thing. That's a positive experience, and they're being more transparent about it. That's what I like about it. They're actually publicizing. They have flyers. They have contact people that you can set up an appointment. So what enthralls me to be excited is to see that our Vietnam veterans are coming in. They're coming in one and two. They're dying off. They're old as hell, but they're still coming in to be acknowledged. Like, hey, I was in Korea and I was exposed to this, or I was in Vietnam, or I was in Chechnya, or I was in Somalia during 1992 or 1989. I was exposed to this, this, and this, and now they're acknowledging, hey, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do an assessment. Let's figure out what we can acknowledge. So they get all these cluster of people coming in, these veterans coming in. They can start collecting the data and kind of get together some science and figure out like what's going on. So my question is, what do they do with that knowledge? What do they do with that data? It's one of those questionable things that I'm still um, leery about. Like, what are they going to do with it? They're going to just let it sit there. They're going to hide it, or they're going to share it. They're going to publicize it. I'm sure it can be public knowledge if you find out through the forward request, like how many people that we tested in the last 3 years for Gulf War illnesses or for those various conditions. I'm sure it would be knowledge if you request for that, but I'd be curious to know when they're going to start acknowledging and compensating those individuals. They're going to wait till half the people die off, or a third of the people die off, or a fourth of the people. I don't know. I don't know. But with systems, there's always systemic issues, and we know it's all generated by money at the end of the day. And so we'll see what happens.
And what measures have you taken personally, or what treatments have you tried regarding this illness?
So I've tried it's ongoing. I mean, I'm always open for any suggestions that providers, if it's within the range of I think reasonable, or I look at the cost benefit. Okay, so I've taken medication. I'm actually on this medication right now for high cholesterol. It's actually an injection I do every 2 weeks. A new drug I guess that they're using, but they were able to justify the necessity for me to get that medication. I was surprised. Like, wow, it's like an EpiPen injection, but I'm open for anything that's going to help um, my quality of life. So yeah, that's the bottom line. So
And you sort of touched on this as well. Have you that you've been involved in research? Do you mind stating more about that?
um, I think I think 3 or 4 of Dr. Golomb research. I've done those, so I mean I find those very rewarding. That whatever she does with the science, but I think just the fact that um, she is opening an opportunity for those individuals is great. I mean, um, I always try to share with people like, hey, there's somebody out there doing research. Here's a contact person, especially those people I know that served in the Gulf War. I mean, I see them from time to time. They come to the VA, and I don't have that many contact friends, but I do see a lot of veterans that come in here and they say, "Oh, I'm Desert Storm." I said, "Are you're Desert Storm? Are you aware there's a research out there?" And so because a lot of them that I know that I've seen, experienced, had contact with, they have attitudes that are negative. And I'll say this because this is secondhand information they share with me. Like, they don't really want to acknowledge the stuff that we were exposed to, and I believe that. I mean, that's the attitudes of a lot of the providers here because, and that's their perception because again, nobody's talking to nobody, nobody's sharing their research, nobody's disseminating that enough for providers, whether it's in the JAMA, whether it's being published in periodicals where a lot of these providers that read on a quarterly basis or whatever, enough exposure nationwide for them to recognize that, hey, this is a serious topic. Why are we discarding some of the risks that a lot of our veterans that were in Desert Storm, Desert Shield were exposed to? Why are we doing that? Why are we not highlighting the potential risk that they may have been exposed to?
Do you have any heroes among other veterans or physicians who have been helpful with this issue?
Yeah, I have a lot of heroes. I had a good primary care provider. Matter of fact, I got my feelings hurt when this person left. I'm like, Dr. Jane left. I had another Dr. Heifetz left. They were very in tune with patient-centered care, and so I have some good providers. I really do. I really have some good providers. I've been fortunate enough to all the providers I picked or I've been given by default. I've been happy to say that they've served me well, and they serve the veterans well. I believe that because they serve me well. That's my perception. So um, when I go to the VA website and I see that these different um, programs exist, and those are champions right there. These are people that's trying to bring to light some of the potential exposures of service members. So that's great that you see that stuff that is publicized. You go to VA website, type in environmental hazard exposure, and you'll see a whole plethora of links and different tabs that show like, okay, this stuff does exist. Here's what's going on. Be a part of this. Come and be a part of this. They give you contact names and numbers that you can reach out to.
What message do you have for any affected veterans that might have similar health issues?
Um, don't let your exposure to your service in country and the theater and combat limit who you are as a human being. It's this thing called um, personal pride. It's a thing called resiliency. Don't let your illnesses or your ailments define who you are. Uh, there are a lot of great individuals in life that have overcome challenges, that have overcome obstacles, um, that have overcome diseases, that have overcome illnesses, despite what science says. The human spirit is definitely resilient. Couple that with support, you have a dynamic person. So my encouragement to them is, hey, if you have issues and you want them addressed, go see somebody that's going to be willing to help you address those issues. For those that don't want to help you, discard them and find someone who will. Don't stop. Don't stop till you get enough, until you get your needs met. There are those individuals out there that want to help you. You just got to find them. Connect yourself with people that's going to be positive.
And what message do you have for healthcare providers that you have previously encountered?
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't drink into the pharmaceuticals. Believe that pills and other things are the answer. I think um, myself, I think holistic medication is very important as well as a lot of the Eastern medicine ways of treating ailments and situations. I think they should have more of an open mind and look and see what's available as far as the science. What does the science say? I know a lot of the challenges with our government today is science. They don't want to believe science. They don't want to believe in global warming. They don't believe in none of this stuff. But you know what? The numbers don't lie. These numbers are produced in volumes. You got hundreds of thousands of people that have these same symptoms. You say it's not because of the water. It's not because of the air quality. Well, I think you're just an atheist with science, and shame on you. So
And do you have a message for healthcare providers who may be trying to learn more about Gulf War illness?
yeah, do your darnest, your hardest to figure out how you can tap into those resources to get more research money, to get more research published, to get more individuals in your field to come on board. That this is a subject that needs to be addressed. And here's why: because it's involving human lives. It involves young men and women, and that went into combat, that went into harm's way, and now the years have gone by, and nobody's acknowledged what their efforts were. And I think this is part of acknowledging what their efforts were is to expose the potential risk of what they may have been exposed to. So that's acknowledging them. That's what I call supporting the troops by publishing things that will share the potential harms that they may have been exposed to.
And do you have a message about the Gulf War for posterity that you would like people to know about?
I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
Just for just some information or a story that you'd like to have the Gulf War or future generations of people to know about.
So when when an individual service member takes that oath of allegiance to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemy, foreign, domestic, I think they truly do mean that. I know when I went in the military, I didn't go in for pay. I didn't go in for reward of um, of, of, um, of the title. I went in because it was something I wanted to do, but better, greater than myself. It gave me opportunity to be a part of something greater than myself, to learn from other people from throughout the world and from different social economic backgrounds. We all have one purpose, which is to serve our country. And to me, it was a calling of combat. It's called combat of arms. It wasn't a 9 to 5 job. It was like a lifestyle change. It was being a part of something that was unique, being part of a legacy of service members that served their country to continue to keep the freedom in which we have is because of our service members. So for those that go in thinking that I might be exposed to this, that's the wrong attitude. You go in with a sense of I'm going to serve my country. I'm going to do what I need to do to protect myself. So what does it mean to protect yourself? It means to be fully knowledgeable of what you're doing. It means to question if you have a doubt. Like for example, I remember there was a time where there was individuals that questioned authority. They questioned the science of the anthrax shots. They questioned it, and guess what? They were court-martialed. And then years later, guess what? The DOD says, you know what? We were wrong. There are some harmful effects from anthrax. And for those individuals that got discharged because they failed to obey a lawful order, they can be adjudicated to have their stuff looked at for reconsideration and get their characterization of service changed because guess what? They took a moral, ethical look at is this right or is this wrong? And the moral conscience said this is wrong. I'm not going to do this. And so, if you feel the same way as a service member that something's not right, you have an obligation to say this is not right. So, looking back, a long time ago with the Tuskegee Airmen, that was a tragedy in human history, as far as the United States, as far as science and vaccination. So, but the government knew what they were doing. So, if a person, an individual feels like it's wrong morally, they have a right to stand up. So, regardless if you sign the oath of allegiance, but if it's not right, if you know consciously it's not right, you have to have an obligation to speak up because it could save other people's lives as well.
And before we conclude, are there any further topics or questions that you would like to address personally that we did not cover in this interview?
Let's get the word out that the Gulf War illness research is out there. We're trying to find participants that want to share their story, that want to be a part of something as far as acknowledging the potential risk of what they may have been exposed to. So I think let's try to get more word out about this.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Joe, for taking the time today to participate in this interview. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, out of your personal life to share your stories and experiences with us.
Well, it was an honor, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Most